Good morning, Bill Neidhardt. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. How are you?
You should be doing great, right? You worked on with and you bet on the right horse, or at least
Hey,
for the. Go ahead.
I I bet on New Yorkers. How about that?
Yeah, that's a better way to frame it. That's right. That's right. Bill, let's start first with what was your involvement with the campaign with the Mamdani Assemblymember Mamdani's campaign?
Yeah, so I worked on the IE that supported Zohran. We called it New Yorkers for Lower Costs. A really unique setup that's not very similar to pretty much any other PAC or IE you have out there. We basically found ourselves in a position where Zohran had maxed out his fundraising, hit the match. He had done as much as he could because he had really strong grassroots support. And we basically looked around and we said, well, hey, we have a candidate who can do grassroots fundraising, but he can't actually do it because he's not allowed. He hit the limit. So we said, why don't we tap into that energy and have a grassroots funded PAC to send out mail, air TV ads, cable ads, digital ads in support of Zohran. And it was 1.5 million, which is not as big as the 25 million that Andrew Cuomo had in his super PAC. But we, did a lot of really targeted stuff to, I think, help push him over the line.
Well, now that that at least the primary has been decided, because now there's a
Yeah,
general, who knows who's in and who's out, right, at this given moment.
right.
Now, seriously, I know you're biased, but just from an out from the outsider looking in, no, I'm being facetious, but
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
a serious question. From the outside looking in, now for real, as a consultant, how would you assess the Cuomo campaign? Again, just on the from the outside, I know you
yeah,
worked on the opposing team, but what were some of the things that you think that, again, with $25 million to spend, you can do a whole lot, right?
yeah.
And with a handful of weeks, that's a lot of money, an exorbitant amount of money. What would you say was their fait accompli? Because I'm reading it was they were focused on cable, not on social media. Give me your analysis.
Yeah. So I do want to say I am biased, right? I worked in New York City Hall with you during the pandemic, and I saw that Andrew Cuomo's decisions did cost lives. So I have to say, first and foremost, Andrew Cuomo is a bad person, and I think he deserved this loss. But let's actually talk about how he got there. And I do think it's a couple things. One, we did a poll really, really early out, like um, I want to say almost 6 months ago, just to kind of look into where the state of the race was, because everyone told us, hey, this is done and decided. This is Andrew Cuomo, and we wanted to say, well, what do people actually think of this guy? And we found that he was intensely disliked by a large proportion of the Democratic primary electorate, and that he had a lot of strong negatives against him. But basically, what you ended up seeing happen is that his super PAC, with massive funding from Trump billionaires, actually became one of the ways that we created the strongest argument against Andrew Cuomo, which was tying all those negatives together in the frame that he's beholden to Trump billionaires, not to New Yorkers. So it was kind of like a whose side are you on type argument. Um, I do think there are some uh, decisions you can look at where it's like, hey, fix the city, the super PAC supporting Cuomo. Yeah, they spend a lot on broadcast, they spend a lot on cable. One of the interesting things they did was, allow Cuomo to actually spend on radio. I think it really comes down to the candidate and not the fact that they were running something that was heavy on TV. The super PAC did what a super PAC's going to do. I think the fact that Andrew Cuomo just lost a step and is out of his prime, and also as a disgraced politician who was chased out of office for a scandal, people weren't excited. People weren't excited by Andrew Cuomo. They haven't been for a long time, and I think that's what it's about.
Bill, but now let's looking towards November. If
Yeah,
former Governor Cuomo decides to throw his hat in the ring, I'm reading, and it's to be expected that the business community, not all, but most,
So
are
yeah,
concerned
yeah,
about a socialist mayor. They're, mobilizing and trying to figure it out. I know I read a story where Mayor Adams has met with the business community, and I hear that
yeah.
they're still trying to court Governor Cuomo to run on an independent line, and that he will not officially step aside as of right now. What are the prospects for November? Do you think, again, in a three-way or four-way, Jim Walden, Sliwa, Mayor
Hmm.
Adams, Governor Cuomo, or if there's a possibility with the vote splitting and with the barrage of ads and money being spent, that this is
Right.
a real problem, right? In terms
Well,
of
I
the
think,
the side you're on, right?
yeah, yeah. I think when you look at let's call it a crowded field, the candidate who typically emerges from a crowded field is one who has a distinct brand different from the rest of the field. And I think right now what you're seeing is that whether it's Bill Ackman, who is a Trump supporting billionaire, or Jeff Loeb, who is, another far right billionaire, these guys, they want to dictate who's going to be the mayor of New York City. The only problem is that most New Yorkers not only strongly disagree with those men, but actively resent those men. And I think you're going to have a field where it's going to basically say, hey, who can stand out here? And if you're saying Eric Adams, Andrew Cuomo, two disgraced former politicians, I don't know which one's more disgraced. I don't know which one's more disliked, but hey, that's pretty similar kind of background. And then you throw in Jim Walden, who's just kind of a faceless, you know, business venture kind of guy. I think the one who really stands out is this young, energetic, really dynamic leader in Zohran Mamdani. So for me, I'm not saying, hey, no worries here. We're going to run all the way through the finish line, right? We're gonna fight hard. But I also would put my money on the candidate who stands out and is different.
I know it's very early, but people like to get
Yeah,
ahead of the right when they
yeah,
see right
yeah.
the lane. Let's face it, that's what happens, right? Success has
Right.
many fathers, failures, and orphan. So Zoran is now a celebrity, for argument's sake. In addition to the Democratic nominee, has the money started to flow, and is the pot going to continue with the same name going into November?
Yeah, the pack's going to be here. And the right now, I think Zoran's doing a lot of fundraising to really get his um, campaign in a strong place to hit matching again. Uh, I'll say the energy and enthusiasm around Zoran has only picked up since his win, and the coalition of people expanded of supporting Zoran has only expanded, which I think is also really important. We're talking about someone who was running, piecing together what ended up being just in the first round about half of the electorate. Um, that coalition's only grown since then. You're already seeing really strong embrace of Zoran from people all across the party, and you even have Democrats across the country saying, like, "Oh, wait, hold on, what's going on here? Maybe there's something we can learn about the path forward."
But Bill, what about the actual PAC, right? I know that obviously Zoran has to be separate of the PAC, but what
Yeah.
what what are you hearing in terms of the PAC and the people working on raising money for the PAC? Has it moved?
Oh, yeah. We're gonna be yeah. We ran plenty of TV ads. We ran plenty of digital ads. We sent some mailers. We're gonna be doing the exact same thing.
Got it. Now let's move to another city that I know you're very familiar with because you were heavily involved with that candidate in his election, Chicago.
Yes,
There was
Windy
a
City.
a play to sort of say, "Hey, New York City, don't do it. We have buyer's remorse in Chicago. We elected a socialist, and now Chicago's, uh, moving in the wrong direction." Right?
Sure.
Thoughts on that and that sort of connection, and what is your analysis of Mayor Brandon Johnson, and draw a compare and contrast between him and Assemblymember Mamdani, the Democratic nominee in New York City?
Yeah, I mean, two very different cities, right? That's one of the things I've learned. I have more experience in New York than I do Chicago. And I was really happy to help out Brandon Johnson in his election. but one of the most glaring things to me was just going around Chicago after years of working in New York City. I was just like, man, I don't get half the stuff that's going on here. Right? This is a foreign, distant land. It is really different, and we're talking a little bit of comparing apples to oranges. I mean, yes, it's the third biggest city in the country, Chicago, but it's you know less than half the size of New York. You're really talking about two very different things. But the business interests were always opposed to Brandon. I think it's a little different in that he really comes from a union background himself, right? He was a member, he was an organizer of the Chicago Teachers Union. That really is the main element that I think people use to criticize him. But that I'm not surprised that there's a very passionate leader, very proud Black Chicagoan who is standing up to a lot of different anti-public school forces, and they're coming after him. Um, it's I got to say one of the toughest jobs in the country. Mayor of Chicago, you look at anyone who's been mayor of Chicago, it's tough to get in there and emerge out of it with a higher approval rating or anything like that. But I'll tell you, he's doing the work. He's building affordable housing. He's expanding funding for schools. He's doing the stuff he said he would when he got in there. So I think there's always going to be critics, but we're really talking about apples and oranges here if you're trying to compare the two.
Got it. So it was essentially a play by the business class in Chicago to warn New York to sort of potentially derail Assemblymember Mamdani.
Yeah, and I don't even know how much it works. I think if you're going to go up to someone and say, "Hey, this guy is fighting to freeze the rent, lower grocery prices, really make the city affordable," but don't listen to him because let me tell you about a thing in Chicago. Weak argument in my book.
Bill, now let's talk about the November potentially what the outcome is in November. As someone advising
Hmm.
the IE for Assemblymember Mandani, what would you prefer? Would you prefer a field that includes former Governor Cuomo, Mayor Eric Adams, Jim Walden, and Curtis Lewa? Further potentiality that maybe they split votes. What would be your ideal
Um,
scenario going into the general?
yeah, I to me it's kind of like whether or not he decides to run. I don't care. I know he was looking at polling from his special pollster Honan strategy group, which, by the way, their last poll of the primary was off by 28 points. So, be careful what you're looking at there, Andy. Um, I'm fine either way. We're fine either way. We're ready to push this thing over the finish line. We have the Democratic nominee in a city that is 70% Democratic voters. That's how we're going to do this thing. So if someone wants to spit in the face of the Democratic Party and Democratic voters, whether it's Eric Adams by hugging and kissing Trump, whether it's Andrew Cuomo by thinking he's better than every other Democrat in the city, um, whether it's wannabe Jim Walden or bizarre Curtis Lewa, whatever it is, we know that we have the Democratic nominee here, and we're gonna push him forward.
Bill, give me. Let's end here with this last
Hmm.
question. Uh, the national level, Senator Bernie Sanders, Congressmember Ocasio Cortez,
Hmm.
uh, the state of the National Democratic Party. Now, uh, Democratic nominee Assemblymember Zohran Mamdani.
Hmm.
I for one, said it many a time. At beginning of this year, post Trump, November. Hey, people don't want left. People don't want left, right? No one's using defund anymore. No one's saying I'm not taking money from real estate at the level which they once were, which was sort of a sort of purity test, right? People seem to be running away from the leftist model. And then out of nowhere, Zoran comes in and puts everything up, turns everything upside down. He openly, right,
Yeah,
defines himself as a socialist. Wait, let me finish.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Is it more organizing? Is it again apples and oranges, or is it more of a national movement? Right? Because it could be that the
Hmm.
man,
Hmm.
again, just like New York City, you have North Brooklyn, you have Western Queens, you have now Bedford Stuyvesant, parts of Bushwick, Ridgewood, that are now leaning towards uh, electing socialists. So is it more of a they just are very good at organizing, mobilizing, door knocking, operationally better, or is this a national wave?
Yeah, I wouldn't, calling it a wave makes it feel like it's come out of nowhere or hasn't been here the whole time. Let's just, I'll walk you through it in the way that I was kind of looking at things. There's a whole lot of polling done ahead of this election. A whole lot, right? Polls from every campaign. What, we had like 9 people running. You had public polls too. Do you know who was the highest rated person that was polled among New Yorkers? And I'm basically, it's anyone across the country. We polled a lot of folks. Other people polled a lot of folks. Who do you like most? Who do you approve of the most? And we took all these national figures. The highest rated person was Bernie Sanders, right? It wasn't someone else. He was approval rating with 80% of the Democratic primary voters in New York City. And that was across demographics, it was across ages. The worst kind of demographics he was in the low 70s. Those are numbers that you can only dream of. To me, it's basically like, yeah, there's some in the political class who were surprised by this. The entire time we were running this campaign, we were seeing that AOC and Bernie Sanders were the most popular Democrats in the city. And then we said, hey, the most popular people support this guy. It led to a lot of Democrats supporting Zohran. To me, it's kind of, for folks who are surprised that Democrats like these kinds of leaders, I don't think they've been listening to Democratic primary voters. I think they've been listening to donors. And that is the big difference to me. If you actually were out there talking to voters, doing focus groups, doing polling, figuring out what voters cared about the most, you would not be surprised that someone focused on affordability, not lecturing people like Andrew Cuomo, will be able to pull this off.
Bill, last question. What, if you were to say from 1 to 3, what was the most impactful thing outside of good candidate, smart candidate, capable
Uh-huh.
candidate, uh, a tremendous work ethic? Is it?
Right.
Is it? I'm going to give you 3.
Sure.
Bernie Sanders endorsement, Congressmember Ocasio-Cortez's endorsement, or Brad Lander deciding, hey, let's
Man.
join forces
Yeah.
on the anyone but Cuomo bandwagon. What
Boy.
would you say was out of those? What was the most? All of them very impactful, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's really so
What
good
would you
choice
say
there.
was the out of 1 to 3? Which
Yeah,
give me
yeah. This
one
this is this is how I'm thinking about it. So with Lander, on election night, you have Mamdani,
or Tish
basic
James. Let me not leave out
or
Attorney General
okay,
Tish James, who
okay.
did a whole lot. Okay,
Did a whole lot. Yeah, and if you look at the TV ads that our PAC put out, you'll see a whole lot of AOC, you'll see Bernie, you'll see Tish. And that's no coincidence. Um, Man, you are I would struggle to do. I would say probably number one is AOC endorsement because we just featured that in a lot of our advertising. And I have to say she really, came in after the debate and we needed a lot of momentum to coalesce behind, consolidate the field. I think she played a pivotal role in doing that. I think her timing was really incredible. I think all the ways that she planned it out were just like endlessly, impactful. But I also don't want to give Brad Lander short shrift. I mean, I think, there was a reason that when we saw Mamdani leading by 9, 8, 7 points, not hitting the 50% mark yet in the first round, but you just looked down at that Lander number and you said, I know a majority of that's going to Zohran because of the way that Lander was campaigning here. Um, that's a tough one to me, but it's between either AOC and Lander. And, both of them speak to the ability of Democrats to bring folks together and say, okay, this is the direction we're going in. We have to align now if we're going to stop Cuomo.
Interesting, Bill. Again, let's wrap this up. Anything you want to
Yeah.
add that I forgot to ask you that you want to
Yeah.
mention?
Have me back on before Election Day. How about that?
All right, Scout's honor, man. But
All right.
you gotta keep me abreast of what's happening, Bill.
Yeah. Yeah. I will. I
How
will.
things are
That's for
moving. All
sure.
right, man. All the best. Thank you. Have a great weekend. All right. All
All
right.
right. You
Bye
too.
bye.
Good. Always good talking to you.